Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you all very much, my dear beloved APCO co-members, and a special warm welcome to our very distinguished speakers also from outside, as well as a few guests that we have today with us. So this is our APCO General Meeting and Congress. We haven't had one in 2021, so even though we're calling it Annual General Meeting, it's actually a meeting after 2020 was the last time that we all met. And since then, we have had a lot more people join APCO, and as all of you know, we have now 47 members from across 20 countries and regions. So thank you very much. And so now it is going to be the time for Professor Jean-Yves Reginster's keynote lecture, which is driving policy change to improve the musculoskeletal health of diverse populations. Now, all of you know Professor Jean-Yves Reginster very well, but because he is our very distinguished keynote lecturer, APCO's very first keynote lecturer, Prof Reginster, it's really a distinct pleasure to welcome you on board this meeting. Professor Jean-Yves Reginster is outstanding professor of epidemiology, public health and health economics, as well as professor of bioethics and societal medicine at the University of Liège, Belgium. He's honorary chair of the bone cartilage metabolism unit there. He is director of the Department of Public Health, Epidemiology and Health Economics, also at the University of Liège. He holds multiple positions. He wears several hats. He's the director of the WHO Collaborating Center for Public Health Aspects of Musculoskeletal Health and Aging. He's visiting professor at the Prince Mutaib Chair for Biomarkers of Chronic Diseases, Department of Biochemistry, College of Science, Riyadh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, King Saud University, and he has more than 900 publications to his credit. He's president of EXCO, which is a European Society for Clinical and Economic Aspects of Osteoporosis and Osteoarthritis. He's co-founder and board member of the International Osteoporosis Foundation, where he also serves as chairperson of the Committee of National Societies. To me personally, more important than all of this, like I said, he is such a distinguished person, but more important to me, Prof Reginster is a very, very dear mentor and friend, and really he has guided me through in the last 10-15 years that I have been associated with IOF. So Professor Reginster, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you. And Prof Reginster is going to be talking from his vast experience over the last 30-35 years on driving policy changes to improve the musculoskeletal health of diverse populations. Prof Reginster, over to you.
Thank you very much, Manju, for this kind invitation first and this lovely introduction. I would like to express my gratitude to all the APCO members for giving me the opportunity of giving this keynote lecture. Let's go through a little bit the current situation of musculoskeletal health in diverse population. What are the challenges? How can we interact with the key people, those who take the decisions, those who really drive the policies? First of all, what we know is that musculoskeletal disorders have a very high burden. They have a clinical, they have a social, they have an economic, they have an ethical burden. And as you can see from that slide, the musculoskeletal disorders are represented here in purple and lavender. And you see that they're affecting mainly females. And this will be extremely important in this discussion that we will have later. But it is also important, here it's in blue, the musculoskeletal disease in light blue. It's also important to understand that the years of lived with disability because of the musculoskeletal disorders increase with age. So the population that we are really focusing on are women over the age of 50 years old. And when we discuss with the policymakers, it's always very important to focus on a certain subset of the population so that they perfectly understand what we are talking about and to whom we would like to bring some support and help. If we take osteoporosis, it is probably the most underrated disease in the world. If we compare the burden of osteoporosis and what is currently done around the world to screen, to diagnose, to prevent, or to treat osteoporosis, there is an incredible gap there. Osteoporosis is here in purple, and all the other green bars are representing the different type of cancers. And what it shows is the lost years of healthy life. And you see that osteoporosis is second only to lung cancer and generates more lost years of healthy life than most of the other cancers. And that's something which we need to bring into discussion, that it is a disease. Osteoporosis is not a normal process of aging. Very often when you talk to someone who says, oh, my mother is 85, she broke her hip, it's normal, she was 85. No, it's not normal. It is a disease. It is a disease that has a burden. It is a disease that can be diagnosed, that can be prevented, and which can be treated. If we take the musculoskeletal disorders as a whole, and that slide refers to another very important condition, which is osteoarthritis, we should also keep in mind that the problem is not only what we see now, but also the fact that many of these musculoskeletal disorders may induce other problems, other disabilities, other disease. And you see here a paper that we recently published that shows that hand osteoarthritis, for instance, almost double the risk of subsequent cardiovascular disorders in women. And if you have osteoarthritis at any location, you have a 50% increase in the risk of developing a cardiovascular disease. So it's important to take into consideration the disease itself, osteoporosis, arthritis, frailty, sarcopenia, but also to consider what can be generated by this disease at the level of other body systems, and the policymaker might be very sensitive to this approach. When we talk to policymakers, we need to talk about money, because that's something they usually perfectly understand. And you see here some data from the IOF showing that the cost of fragility fractures equals the sum of the cost of stroke and the cost of coronary heart disease. And if 1/10 of the efforts that are currently brought in fighting coronary heart disease was brought to improve fragility fractures, I'm sure that we would be in a much better solution. Just a small word to say that during the pandemic, the chronic disorders have been extremely poorly treated, and they've been set aside, and I perfectly understand what the emergency was. But something important, I mentioned that osteoporosis, for instance, is mainly affecting women over the age of 50. It has been clearly demonstrated that during the pandemic, there were health and gender inequalities, and that the COVID pandemic mainly impacts women's health, women's wealth, and women's social welfare. So the patients we are dealing with, the patient we are focusing on, those patients have been insufficiently diagnosed, insufficiently treated during the pandemic. We need, when discussing with the policymakers, we need to have them understanding that it's the right time now to reprioritize musculoskeletal disorders on the map of the diseases which deserve and which need to be treated. We have done a lot of things together. We, EXCO, International Osteoporosis Foundation, our sister society in the field of bone, the field of joint, in the field of muscle. What did we do to try to change the policy? First of all, we developed, thanks to Dr. Keynes in the United Kingdom, this FRAX algorithm that allows, within a few minutes, just by asking a few clinical questions, which allows to really identify the patients who are at increased risk of developing fractures in the next 10 years. It's a wonderful tool. There are only a few disorders around the world which we have that type of tool for the screening and for the diagnosis, the screening and the assessment of the risk in such a period of 10 years. We have been publishing guidelines. We know that when we want to prioritize a disorder in a specific area, region, country, whatever, one of the most significant tools that we can have is to have guidelines which are accepted, which are endorsed by local key opinion leaders, and which are endorsed by policymakers and by authorities. This is probably the single best way to increase the importance of a disorder and the recognition of a disorder as an important point of care in a specific area, a specific region. We have been publishing here, for instance, guidelines for the management of knee osteoarthritis, which have been endorsed almost all around the world. You see the endorsement in China, the endorsement in Southeast Asia, the endorsement in Eastern Europe, in Russia. So that's an important tool. We also try to work in reducing and mitigating the differences that can occur when different guidelines are published by different societies. If you want to convince policymakers that you have a strategy to fight against a disorder, you have to come with a unified voice. It's extremely disingenuous and counterproductive when two different organizations, two different societies, two different groups, or more than that, come with different guidelines, because then the authorities will tell you, oh, you cannot even agree. How could I propose a strategy? So it's very important to harmonize the guidelines, and you see here that we try to harmonize our guidelines for the management of osteoarthritis with another organization which has some different view, and we realized after working together that it was mainly related to methodological issue and not to a different perception of the disease. So that's a key point when discussing with policymakers, come as one single voice. And also for osteoporosis, we tried to, together with Dr. Chandran, we tried to produce an algorithm for the management, which was something very simple to use, and that can be practically used by the physician. It's completely useless for the physician when you have guidelines saying the level of evidence for that particular medication is 1 and the grade of evidence is A. It doesn't tell the people how should I work. That doesn't tell the policymakers you should reimburse that particular tool for the diagnosis. You should reimburse that particular medication for the treatment. We try to be extremely clear and practical here with an initial assessment of the risk, thanks to FRAX, low risk, high risk, very high risk. Easy to stratify the population, and then for each level of risk, we offered a strategy which was very clear and says exactly what has to be done, what has to be prioritized in those different conditions. So be practical, be unified, and then you can discuss with the policymaker. Nevertheless, apparently we failed to a certain amount, because if we look at the percentage of the population who deserves to be treated and who are not treated, there is a significant gap there. If we just look at the 6 most important countries in Europe, you see that in 2017, 73% of the people with osteoporosis who should have received a treatment do not. And what is even more of a concern to me is that if we compare the percentage in 2010 and in 2017, it has not improved despite everything we tried to overcome this issue. Would you accept to go to the cardiologist to be diagnosed with hypercholesterolemia and to be said, come back after the first myocardial infarction? I don't believe so. Would you accept that less than 20% of people who had a heart attack received a secondary prevention? You wouldn't accept that. And unfortunately, that's what's happening today with osteoporosis. So what we realize is that we did well for the musculoskeletal disorders, but still we must try harder. We have not been sufficiently effective, and we developed a lot of activities, a lot of alliances to try to overcome that lack of efficacy, that lack of significant results. I said alliances are very important. At EXCO, we have alliances with other scientific societies, but we also build strong relationships with the World Health Organization and with the European agency, with the body which is in charge to grant marketing authorization to new drugs. And we had a feeling that working together with them could significantly improve the situation. At the level of IOF, thanks to the work done by Philippe Halbout, who is sharing this presentation with me, and I'm very proud of that. thanks to Philippe and his highly dedicated team, we have built strong alliances, and we are very proud, by the way, to closely work with you, the Asia Pacific Consortium on Osteoporosis. You do a wonderful job in Asia, and we are really, really happy to work with you. Those alliances are extremely important to unify our voice and to be stronger together. World Health Organization. It is a critical organization when it comes to global health. It's an organization which is recognized and accepted all around the world, and we are very happy now that healthy aging has been brought as a top priority at the WHO. They define healthy aging as the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. So it's exactly what we together try to achieve. And you see that I like that slide because it shows the intrinsic capacity. What is intrinsic capacity? It's the level of resilience of an individual facing external stressors. So if you fall, what's going to happen? Are you just be fine? Or are you going to break your hip? That's what is the intrinsic capacity. And then following the level of intrinsic capacity and the amount, the magnitude of the external stressors that you will face, you will have a functional ability. As you can see, the functional ability is meeting everyday basic needs, is staying mobile, building and maintaining relationship, continuing to learn and making decisions, contributing to family and communities. The goal of healthy aging is to optimize the functional ability, and it is well recognized that there are different domains which are important, but locomotor capacity is always ranked as the #1 of these domains. And you see here, musculoskeletal conditions contribute to locomotor capacity and vitality. So this partnership with WHO in the perspective of healthy aging is of paramount importance if we want to convince the policymakers that what we are fighting, osteoporosis, is really a disease that they should take into consideration. Recently, we organized with our WHO Collaborating Center, a certain number of colleagues, we organized an expert working group to redefine the conceptual framework, the definition, and the available tools to assess locomotor capacity. Once again, I come back to my point, unified voice, and be practical, be concrete, and offer solutions. When you discuss with policymakers, you always need to bring solutions and not only questions and not only complaints. This United Nations Decade of Healthy Aging is also very important for us. You see here, objective, deliver integrated care and primary health services responsive to all the people. And I would say for us, to all the people with musculoskeletal conditions. And based on that, you can have an action which can be global, which can be regional. And I think that someone is unmuted. So global, regional, or national, it's very important to act at these different levels. A very nice tool which we can use to improve the perception, the knowledge, and the understanding of our musculoskeletal condition is this platform, which has been developed by WHO. It is an online multilingual space that brings people and their diverse knowledge expertise together to foster the collaborations and synergies needed for transformative change. You see, as professional, member states, private sector, care professional, all the people in general, academia, everybody is feeding that particular platform, which is incredibly helpful to bring the musculoskeletal disease on the map of the Healthy Aging Project, and then to come to the policymaker and show them, oh, we are all unified, United Nations, WHO, academic, patients organizations. So that's really important. You see here, it features stories, there are photos, there are quotes, there are interviews, publication, database, a lot of things that were all together to really bring healthy aging as a first priority. So do not hesitate to take reference of this platform, feed it. It's only with what we feed that the platform will become a very useful tool. Now let's come to what we do with Philippe at the IOF, the International Osteoporosis Foundation. As you know, our vision is a world without fragility fractures in which healthy mobility is a reality for all. Driving politicians and engagement with policymakers is one of the key actions of the International Osteoporosis Foundation. It's one of our priorities. We have a very strong IOF network. I will come back to this in a minute. We have the importance of scientific credibility, and I would like to insist on that point. We need to avoid prominent involvement of the industry. We know that we are partnering with industry. We are all in the same ship. If they develop good drugs, if they sell good drugs, the patient will be treated and will be happy. But in many of our actions, industry should remain out of the loop, should remain discreet, should remain behind the screens. Some of the recent organizations which have been developed, like for instance, the Global Consortium on Healthy Aging or other organizations, are too much labeled as industry oriented. This is disingenuous and this is counterproductive when we discuss with the health authorities and with the health policy makers. Something we are very proud of, and I have the great privilege to chair this organization of our Committee of National Societies, a network of more than 300 societies from close to 150 countries. 94% of the global population is covered. So when we talk to policymakers, we talk as representing 94% of the worldwide population. Congratulations to APCO for having taken the decision to conduct this Pathfinder audit. Is extremely important. It provides benefit to the staff, to the national societies, and it provides an incredibly effective tool to discuss with policymakers and administrators. The World Osteoporosis Day, we have been successful during the last 10 to 15 years to have one day which is dedicated to osteoporosis. It's, as you know, the 20th of October every year. This shows how many activities were in 2020 around the world. And you see that in 2021, it was even better. There were 270 events from 46 countries. Once again, unified voice. In one day, the 20th of October, we all work together to make a lot of noise, a lot of interest around the osteoporosis. Special activities from IOF, as I said, the APCO resources, the interaction with policymakers here in Argentina, Bone Legislative Forum in Mexico, Patient Global Charter, World Osteoporosis Day. I will briefly elaborate on some of them. Engagement with policymakers is extremely important. If you involve them in your discussion, they will feel more prone to support the idea that osteoporosis is a top priority. We did that in many countries, just an example here in France, an example in Brazil, an example in Mexico with this legislation forum. The IOF Global Patient Charter. The purpose of this was to have a tool to drive policy changes for national societies and healthcare to use at local level. And it has been now endorsed by more than 100 of our CNS members, so it's available in 30 languages and it's integrated in all our advocacy and policy activities. Regional audits, I already said how happy I am with the APCO audit. We had regional audits run by IOF in several parts of the world, looking at the epidemiology, the cause, the burden of osteoporosis. There have been thematic reports that can be used to provide some clear, easy to understand information to policymakers who are not always physicians, who are not always healthcare professionals, and we need to understand what the situation is, what can be done, how they can contribute to improve the positioning of osteoporosis on the top of the list. We are very proud of our last baby. Our last baby is not Dr. Chandran. Our last baby is the IOF University Network, and it's something which is starting, and it's starting very well. Want to involve the young investigator, the people of tomorrow, Those will help us in the coming years to fight osteoporosis. In a few weeks, actually, we had 30 universities joining, and Manju has been incredibly active to have the universities from Singapore and from Southeast Asia joining. So as you see, Manju is our bone healer in the hills. I like very much that picture, but she has been really instrumental in making that activity was just started already a success. Thank you very much for this. We've just published a couple of weeks ago the Scope 21. What is a Scope 21? Is a scorecard for it. At this stage, it's for European countries together with some outliers like the UK and Switzerland where I live. And we looked at key indicators for 4 domains: burden of disease, policy framework, service provision, and service uptake. And you see there are some scorecards showing for each of the determinants of those 4 domains. If the country does well, green; does poorly, yellow; doesn't do anything, red. And that's something that we can use when talking to the policymakers, saying, listen, in your country here, guy, you're in Italy, for instance, you're red, 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 red. There is something that you need to do. Compare yourself with the other countries, and you will see that you are not doing very well, and things can be improved. Capture the Fracture Partnership is probably one of the flagship operations, and Philippe will certainly elaborate on that later. It is the promotion, the development of these fracture liaison services, and we can now show that this improves patient outcomes, that this saves money, and that this saves lives. Always try to come with a positive message showing that if the policymaker do something and you provide the practical opportunities, this will help the patients, this will save money, this will save lives. That's a language that they understand. Capture the fracture. You see that we have almost 700 FLS now, fracture liaison services in more than 50 countries. The quality of these fracture liaison services has been rated as a gold, silver, bronze medal. And I should say that I'm very much impressed, because if you look at the ratio between the gold medals and the number of FLS in the region, Asia Pacific is our #1 region by far, with the highest ratio of the FLS in Asia having been granted a gold medal. What is the concept of an FLS? I think most of you know that very well. Identify fragility fracture patients, investigate, assess, treat on a personal basis, monitor the treatment, interact with the primary care physician, and then you can come to the health authorities, to the policymakers, the policy changer, and tell them, by doing this, we have less fracture, we have less secondary care admission, we have fewer care home admission, and we have healthcare benefits. Once again, we come with something practical and something for which we are able to demonstrate that there is a benefit for the patient, a benefit in the societal perspective, and an economic advantage, which is something that the policymakers usually see as their first priority. Capture the Fracture Partnership, 5 pillars: policy, engaging with policymakers, involve them, mentorship, customized educational best practice and peer-to-peer mentorship support, scalable solution, a global hub of resources, digital tool to help the creation, the management, support of this fracture liaison services post-fracture care organization, and once again, ICOM, coalition, uniting national key stakeholders. That's really important to work as a whole. And let's briefly summarize what our objective. Our objective is to increase the number of the FLS program, improve their quality, and reduce the risk and the number of fractures. Objective is to reduce hip fractures and vertebral fractures by 25% by 2025, and to double now this year the existing FLS program. To do that, we need to provide tools. We need to help the people. It's not good to just say, oh, you should do an FLS. Help them, mentor, support them. Mentorship program, best practice framework, slide kits, toolkit, webinars, benefit calculator, global patient charter. That's things that we need to develop to be ready to come to the policymaker and see, okay, look, that's what we have to do, and that's how we can help you to do it. We have the tools, we can support, we can help. And if you do that, then you will see that you will provide a benefit to the patient, you will spare money, and you will spare life. That's what we wanted to do here by having a performance indicator set that measure the effectiveness of a fracture liaison service. There is always, at the level of policymakers, a lot of reluctance for new approaches, for things that appears to cost money. But if you can come and say that's a clinical benefit, that's an economic benefit, and subsequently there is an ethical need there, then you have a chance to push them to change their policy approach and to be more active. I will stop here and I will give the floor to Philippe Halbout, the IOF CEO. I just wanted to say that, as you know, unfortunately this year we have been obliged to run once again the WCO as a virtual event, but really we cross the fingers that next year in May, the pandemic will be somehow behind us and that we will be able to be all together in person in Barcelona, in Spain. So thank you very much once again. Thank you to Major Chandran. Thank you to the APCO members for giving me the opportunity of sharing these few thoughts with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Prof Reginster. Really a fantastic lecture, which covers the length and breadth of all the amazing activities that IOF and EXCO and as part of the WHO what you have done, and some real pearls in there which I wrote down to actually how to engage policymakers. So thank you very much again. And what we'll do is that I'll have Philippe come on and we'll have Philippe's presentation, and then after Philippe's presentation we will have a few minutes of Q&A with you. So now let me introduce, again, really no need to introduce Philippe Halbout. He's a very valued member of our own APCO EXCO, but in addition, all the incredible positions that he holds. So again, my pleasure to welcome Philippe on board. He doesn't need any special welcome because he's part of APCO. But Dr. Philippe Halbout, as all of you know, heads IOF as the Chief Executive Officer since 2016. And before that, he was the Executive Director of IOF. IOF, as all of you know, International Osteoporosis Foundation, is the largest global NGO in the bone field. His areas of responsibility are staggering. They include strategic and program development, as well as ensuring the foundation's financial growth and stability. He is the recipient of the 2021 IOF President's Award, given in honor of an individual who has worked tirelessly to improve and to facilitate the activities of IOF worldwide. And Dr. Halbout earned his PhD in immunology from the Pasteur Institute in Paris. He has extensive experience in the bone field, and before coming to IOF, actually, he's had a very successful 17-year career. I increased it from 15, Philippe, because I think we got it from the net when it said 15, but I think now it's 17. 17-year career in the pharmaceutical industry, in which he held leadership roles within research and development, international marketing, and scientific communication, with specific focus on osteoporosis therapy at Merck. And he was a director of competitive intelligence for all therapeutic areas at the global level at Servier before that. And Philippe, again, is what can I say? I mean, he is an amazing, incredible friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine. And I first met him in 2016 when he took over the reins of IOF as its CEO I think in November 2016. And within less than a month, he was organizing the IOF Asia Pacific Regionals in Singapore in 2016. And we hit it off then, and I consider it as a very deep privilege to have Philippe as a close friend and guide in this field. So Philippe, please, the stage is yours, and Philippe is just going to give a quick presentation, very practical aspects of what the key steps for driving policy changes are to prioritize bone health. Philippe, please.
Thank you very much, Manju. It's definitely a great pleasure to be with you today. And yeah, your introduction reminds me that this journey actually started now years ago. And in fact, next slide, please. Yeah, what is good, maybe just as a short introduction of my talk after the great presentation of Professor Reginster, is just to share with you, simple key figures that illustrate the burden that we are facing. Actually, each and every year, we are facing 9 million fractures a year. So it means one fracture each and every 3 seconds in the world. So it's definitely huge. You know that 1 in 3 women age of 50 years and more are going to suffer from osteoporosis and fractures, and 1 in 5 men. And in fact, it's the cost associated to this burden and the consequences, the outcomes, the fractures, is dramatically increasing for years. And in fact, those figures that we know well are a bit frustrating, because basically the management of osteoporosis started almost 40 years ago. And during these years, in fact, we collegially, I mean the researchers, the doctors, we succeeded to develop or to improve the management of osteoporosis, diagnosis and treatments and so on. But basically the figures are still dramatic. And there is a reason for that has been perfectly well explained and illustrated by Professor Reginster. We failed. We failed not through our efforts to drive, to improve the management of osteoporosis, but we failed to influence the direction of this journey by the health policies, generally speaking. Next slide. As a consequence, it became for both EXCO and IOF a tremendous priority to drive policy changes at the global level. The idea here, the strategy here, is really to show our collegial effort, common efforts, impacting in the bone field in the long term. So to drive policy changes is certainly an easy journey. And we have first to keep into account, or to take in mind, that first, this is a long process. This is something that we have to initiate, and we have to agree that it will take time. So this is the first point. And the second point is that to drive policy changes is a multi-step process. And this multi-step process, because this is a complex one, you have, unfortunately, the opportunity to meet a lot of obstacles and challenges. And in this short presentation, I'll be glad to share with you, in fact, a practical feedback from IOF in the recent years on this matter. So the next slide. So the first one, that is certainly not the easiest one, is to identify the right contacts. Indeed, when you want to drive policy changes, you can to identify the right contacts require close collaboration with the societies, because sometimes the right contacts could be the front stage politician who is speaking and who is acting on the TV and so on. And sometimes this is somebody who is working hard in the backstage in an office and to push and to update the health policies. And then the key point, to identify the right contacts in order to understand who has the concrete capability to update the health policies regarding osteoporosis, is definitely a challenge. So in IOF, we can definitely benefit from the 302 organizations at the global level who are of a great help to identify the right contacts. And here I have 2 examples to share with you. So in Brazil and Taiwan, for instance, in Brazil in October 2021, so a few months ago, I have the opportunity to discuss with a representative from the Ministry of Health in Brazil, and to introduce notably the FLSs and lysis, capture the fractures, and so on. And clearly to identify those people that I didn't know, basically, was this capability was due to the close connection with the local societies. And now the door is opened. We keep, talking with those people, hoping then to drive changes of the policies. Taiwan, let's be back in August 2019, so 2 years and a half ago. We had the opportunity to discuss with notably the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Taipei and other important people. And again, it was due to the close collaboration with the societies. So as Professor Reginster mentioned, alliance, synergy between organizations are extremely important to identify the right contacts, notably. Next slide. So the other challenge is to take the policy agenda into account. Indeed, to drive policy changes means that somehow you're going to impact the local politics. As you can imagine, at IOF, we are working in 148 countries, so basically at the global level, and each and every country has its own agenda. And I'm very happy to share with you this experience in France, in which you can understand that I'm extremely involved. So in France, basically 2 years ago, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, in fact, stated osteoporosis as a key priority in France. And in parallel, an alliance emerged between three influence societies, so AFLAG, UN, SFR, to deliver a kind of blue book presenting osteoporosis, introducing osteoporosis, its burden, consequences, cost, and so on. And this actually progressed with the strong involvement of French deputies, for instance. But now the French election for the presidents, are coming, in May, for instance, and we know we have to accept that basically the agenda is somehow stuck up to the French elections. So, and afterwards, something again will need to be restarted because we don't know whether the French deputies still engage, already engaged in this process, will still be here, in a few months ago. So to take the policy agenda and the politician agenda into account, to understand that is extremely important. Next slide. So the third challenge is to have a deep understanding of the local context. You can, of course, perfectly imagine that the challenges that we are facing in France, Italy, and Spain are totally different from those in Taiwan or Vietnam or in New Zealand or in Mexico and so on. And for that, again, the strong collaboration, and I like to say synergy between the CNS members and IOF are of tremendous importance. Indeed, the CNS members are definitely the local experts. They know, the local societies, they know better than anybody else what are the challenges, expectations, urgent needs, priorities. So this is extremely important to understand that at the level of IOF, whereas in IOF, we have here the credibility to bring this global experience and also to benchmark what has been done in one country and facing somehow the same or similar local challenge. So a deep understanding of the local context is, of course, of tremendous importance again. Next slide. Next, please. Then, to succeed or to meet those challenges, I said that many, many times, but we truly believe in EXCO and IOF that the optimal synergy between organizations is definitely key. So of course, I have nothing to teach to APCO because this is really the essence of the APCO is to put, different people coming from different horizons in the same room precisely to see emerging this synergy. But I like to share with you, a practical example where this synergy was extremely successful. It came from South Korea in August 2018. And in fact, I've had the opportunity to meet the Minister of Health in South Korea. And in fact, it was an incredible meeting, as you can imagine. This is not all the time that you have this opportunity. And I've had also the opportunity to meet with the head of the policies, I would say, in their assembly in South Korea. So two very, very influential people. And when I discussed with the organizers how they succeeded in 2 days to organize these meetings, these so important people, they explained to me that it came precisely from the combination between IOF and the national organization. So again, IOF was here to bring the global voice for osteoporosis prioritization, again, showing benchmark, explaining, bringing a broad image, picture of the situation, whereas the local expertise was here, to bring their local knowledge on the situation. And again, IOF alone certainly won't have this capability to meet the Ministry of Health and so on, because the guys who could say, oh, who are you? You are working in Switzerland, you don't know nothing, from South Korea, so you're nice, but we have nothing to say. And for the local expertise, they are something seen as a bit biased because they are promoting their own field. And the combination of the two was definitely successful. So we are still engaged in South Korea, to make the things progressive. Next slide. Then extensively described by Professor Reginster to position osteoporosis as a chronic disease is definitely a priority. And for that, we can follow different approaches. So benchmarking with other chronic disease, as explained by Professor Reginster, is definitely key. Yeah. So what is important on this topic is to keep in mind, again, that in order to have a kind of credibility in the front of those important people, each and every message has to be based on facts. Sometimes the main issue is to obtain data, credible, reliable data, to support the messages with the policymakers. I can give you this example in Argentina, for instance. When I discussed with those authorities, it was in 2019 too. In fact, they explained to me that they are lacking data. So you cannot have any chance to drive or to update a situation without this data. So at the end, the messages that to be conveyed to the authorities has to be supported by strong, reliable evidence. Next slide. Then this one is really, really important for me. In fact, when you have this incredible opportunity to discuss, for instance, with politicians or Minister of Health, or sometimes it happened with René Rizzoli, even president of a state, of a country. In fact, you have sometimes 15 minutes to convince them that osteoporosis matters and that they have to do something to update the situation. And then there is a huge and heavy work and very important work to be done in the backstage before those meetings. That is to develop very simple evidence-based key messages. Let's say that at the maximum, you have to prepare 3 messages highlighting the local priorities, and as Professor Reginster said, to provide solutions. This is extremely important, not to come to them just crying and saying that this is a disaster, but to explain that there is an issue, they are facing an issue. This issue costs a lot of money, and the idea is to use this money in a better way to improve the situation of the patient, to improve the patient care, but also to make some savings, hopefully. But to prepare these messages is extremely important. We have to keep in mind that in most cases, people know absolutely nothing about osteoporosis. Sometimes they are not doctors at all. So the messages have to be also very simple and impactful, but always based on evidence. Next slide. Then on this purpose, IOF developed policy resources. We are short on time, so we are going to move on because really well explained by Professor Reginster before. So next slide. And finally, the last step, extremely important, is how we can help disseminating and implementing the osteoporosis management guidelines. And indeed, this is another topic, because first, as soon as we succeed, to initiate changes of the health policies, we have also to assist the authorities to make those changes or policies implemented at the local level. And again, the only way to succeed is to collaborate with the local players, the local societies. We have a few examples here, like in Brazil or in Italy, in Europe, for instance, in which such collaboration was really important. But again, as Professor Reginster said, there is no way to convince the HCPs in having a very high-level technical language. Again, we have to step into the shoes of the HCPs and then to use, a language that is acceptable for them, to be extremely practical. So let's say that with the policymakers, we have to have a language extremely robust in terms of science, but simple in terms of message. And I would say for the HCPs, we have to be practical align with their expectations regarding the clinical management, their day-to-day life. I think that it was the last slide. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I'll be pleased to answer your possible questions.
Philippe, you and I are joining together to actually moderate this quick question and answer session. Thank you very much, Philippe. Again, covered the length and breadth of policy making in less than 10 minutes. Thank you so much. We really do not have much time left, but I think there is a question put forward by Kai Tolman.
Hi, thank you for the great talk, Professor Reginster and Philippe. I think you gave a lot of insights that we will find very useful. One of the things APCO will be focusing on this year and beyond is partnership with national societies and their guideline committees to seek the framework, the clinical standards of care, to be embedded into clinical practice. And I think one of the great things we can learn from IOF is how we build those partnerships with national societies. And I know that you've both touched on it a little. I submitted my question before Philippe focused on a few, but I wanted to maybe pass by that topic again and ask if there are any specific insights you can give about how a regional organization can best partner with a national society. Thank you.
Philippe, I may maybe start as the chair of the Committee of National Societies.
Of course.
I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, partnering with the local society is of overwhelming importance. You will never be able to achieve anything in the country if you don't have the full support from the local people. And what is really important is to give them the key, to give them the driving seat. What has to be avoided at any rate is to come, in a very arrogant way, like in the top-down approach, saying, we know what's good for you, we know what you have to do, this is our framework, it has been validated by top experts in the world, you have just to abide with us. It's really to come, we did that a lot with EXCO on osteoarthritis, having our guidelines eventually endorsed. But what I mean endorsed doesn't mean that we came with the guidelines saying, that's what you have to do. We came with the guidelines and we told them, just see that as a framework. See what is good for you there, see what you don't like, see what has to be adapted. You are in the driving seat. You are the person who will eventually go with us to the policymakers. And it's really important to empower the local society and just to consider ourselves, yourself, as a service provider. We come with tools that we have been developing. You like them, you take them. You don't like them, you don't need to take them. Okay. We have IDs. You endorse our ID, fine. You don't endorse our ID, good. Let's just be there to help you a little bit so that you do not need to reinvent the wheel and you do not need to spend a lot of resources to do what we have been doing before, but you are the most important person. That's really the message that you need to convey to these local people and make sure that at the end of the day, they are happy with what they have in hand, so they don't have the feeling that some kind of post-colonialist approach, you brought them the truth. At the end of the day, you will see that in 95% of the cases, you will agree with them. But if there is a disagreement, you have to be prepared to accept it and to let them do what they feel good for their people, for their country, because those are the ones who know better than we do what is good for them.
Thank you so much, Prof Reginster. Really sound advice. From what I could gather from both your talks, I felt that both of you delivered some key messages which we can use to engage policymakers. And I liked your statement about don't go crying, saying it is a disaster, but go with the solution. So impress upon them the cost savings, piggyback on other chronic diseases, show solutions like you said, and then a unified strategy, which I think is extremely important, rather than discordant voices popping up all over. If we can go with a unified kind of voice, I think that would help. So I think because we have taken a lot of Prof Reginster's time already, so early in the morning on Saturday, I think we'll draw this session to a close. Thank you so much, Prof Reginster. Really heartfelt thanks.